A year and a half into this ongoing global pandemic, we continue seeing big and rapid changes in our lives and in Oregon's economy. And just in September, we've seen the peak in another wave of COVID-19 cases. Oregon's K-12 and universities have been bringing students back on campus for in-person learning after 18 months of being mostly physically closed. And we've seen the end of the pandemic federal unemployment benefit programs. Now, all these changes will have impacts on Oregon's workers and businesses. Let's touch on the schools first. Between June and August, local government payrolls, about half of which are public K-12 or higher education, they've added 14,600 jobs. As schools have been stepping up for fully in-person learning, that's another set of employers who are hiring drivers and food preparation and serving staff, just like so many other businesses have at the same time. So that's more competition for workers. We also know, heading into the pandemic, 1 out of 6 workers in Oregon's labor force was in a household where all the available adults worked, where they worked jobs that couldn't be worked remotely, and where there were children present in the house. So the return of fully in-person school also creates the opportunity for some of the parents who might not have been able to take an in-person job to do so again. So that's a potential for more people to rejoin the workforce. Now, to illustrate the point, nationally, between the second half of August and the first half of September, the number of people who said their main reason for not working was because they were caring for children who weren't in school or daycare, that dropped by 2.7 million. Now, at the same time, the number of people who said the main reason that they weren't working was because they had COVID-19 or because they were caring for somebody who had COVID-19 or COVID symptoms, that rose by 2 million. And that brings me to the virus and the recent peak in the Delta variant wave of the pandemic. We know that COVID itself is still a barrier keeping some people from being able to take jobs. And between April and June, there were 32,500 workers in Oregon who said they were prevented from looking for work due to COVID-19 related reasons. And at the same time as these other developments, the federal pandemic unemployment benefits have ended. And even though some people were able to move over from an expiring claim to a regular unemployment claim, it still looks like roughly 81,000 people in Oregon had their benefits end after Labor Day weekend. The largest number was the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation, or PEUC claims. There were about 49,000 workers who saw those benefits end, and there were another about 32,000 who were mostly self-employed, whose Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, or PUA, claims ended. Now, there's been some general expectation that once the federal pandemic benefits ended, it would also mark the end of Oregon's worker shortages. We don't know what'll happen in terms of immediate job gains until our next unemployment and jobs reports. Until then, we do have some information that might help inform our expectations, though. Between April and June, Oregon's private employers had a record 98,000 job vacancies. And that's not including the public schools, which I just mentioned have been hiring a lot too. So the 98,000 is at least how many jobs businesses have been looking to fill in recent months. Now, of the estimated 81,000 people whose federal pandemic benefits ended in Oregon, the 49,000 who were on PUC, they were the ones who primarily worked for a payroll employer before they lost their jobs. About 8,400 of those PEUC claimants whose benefits ended were mainly working in hotels, restaurants, or bars before they lost their jobs. So if you could assume that all of them would go directly to a payroll job in the same industry where they worked before, once they lost their benefits, that would be a lot more available workers to those employers. Yet at the same time, Oregon's hotels, restaurants, and bars are still 35,000 jobs below their pre-recession employment level. So that leaves a pretty large gap to where the industry was before, or to the number of job vacancies out there in the broader leisure and hospitality sector. And if you ran through the same kind of possible scenario in other industries, there would also still be notable gaps in manufacturing, education, and healthcare too. And the end of the pandemic benefits also has different impacts in different areas of the state. Now, again, if we're looking at those PEUC workers whose benefits ended, if they are workers whose PEUC benefits ended, if they all moved into payroll jobs in the respective regions where they lived once their benefits ended, it would fill less than 1/3 of the job vacancies in Northwest Oregon, the South Coast and Douglas County, Eastern Oregon, or Central Oregon in the East Cascades region that goes from the Columbia Gorge down to California. And if you assume the same kind of scenario in Portland, the Mid-Willamette Valley, or in Lane County, that would the workers whose PEUC benefits ended would fill about 3 out of 5 private job vacancies in those geographic areas. Again, that assumes a strong geographical and career match between those workers and hiring employers. Now, there are still the 32,000 people whose PUA benefits ended too. As the program drew to a close, about 4 out of 5 of those workers were self-employed. Although they might make the switch to a payroll employer, many who were self-employed may be restarting their businesses instead. Now, if you did add all the PUA claims that ended to the PEUC benefits that ended, and made all of that an available workforce to payroll employers, they would still account for less than half of the job openings that employers want to fill in Northwest Oregon and Eastern Oregon. And it would only be slightly more than half in Southwest Oregon or the East Cascades area. Now, again, this is all premised on people going right back to payroll jobs once those benefits have ended. And from what we've seen in the states that ended their pandemic unemployment benefits early, they didn't see an immediate return of all those workers to payrolls. In the states that ended those programs in June and July, by early August, only 1 out of 8 of those workers were back on the job. And I think that speaks to those other factors, schools restarting in-person instruction and an ongoing pandemic as being critical to workers' ability to take jobs. Now, as we look to the end of the week and the end of this month, our research team is tracking how many workers might be furloughed in a potential federal government shutdown. Based on what we know now, it looks like if a shutdown were to occur, it could impact as many as 13,000 jobs in Oregon. And looking ahead, we're also trying to determine how many jobs in Oregon are covered by the state and federal vaccine guidelines that take effect in October. With that, I will put myself back on mute and turn it over to Acting Director David Gerstenfeld. Thank you.
You're still on mute too, David.
Thank you. It's one of those days. So I'll reiterate my thanks to Gail and to everyone for joining us this afternoon. And want to focus first on people finding work in our WorkSource Oregon centers that continue their focus on helping people find jobs and on helping employers find talented workers. Since we began our focused return to work efforts in late June, the WorkSource Oregon centers have been working hard to refer people to jobs, connect job seekers to resources that can reduce barriers keeping them from returning to work, help people explore career options and training opportunities, assist with iMatch skills and work search requirement questions, and much more. Currently, we've been looking for ways to help address the urgent statewide need to fill healthcare jobs and other positions that support the healthcare industry. Those include food service, facilities, and business administration positions. Oregon's healthcare and social assistance providers are hiring at an unprecedented rate to fill that need. We've been hosting a series of events to connect job seekers with healthcare positions. And up next is our Hiring Heroes for Healthcare in Oregon, a statewide virtual job fair scheduled from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Wednesday, October 6th. More than 30 employers have signed up and even more are expected to participate. We're also promoting this event nationally to recruit more talented healthcare professionals to come and live and work in Oregon. We also have a multiple employer job fair from 3 to 6 p.m. on Friday, October 8th at the Salem Kroc Center, as well as drive-through job fair hiring events on October 20th and 21st for job seekers in Clatskanie, Rainier, and Vernonia. These events and more are included on our website at worksourceoregon.org. A reminder that to ensure the safety of our employees and visitors and to prevent further spread of COVID-19, masks must be worn by employees and customers. Our new online scheduling tool is live in Spanish and English, and more than 700 people have used it since its launch a little over a week ago. People filing new benefit claims must complete a one-on-one orientation to receive their benefits, and they can use this tool to schedule this required orientation. To use it, go to worksource.org and click on the contact button for either language page. The tool has options to schedule virtual appointments with an employment specialist at one of the WorkSource Oregon centers throughout the state, or in-person appointments for those needing face-to-face assistance. Job seekers can also schedule time to use a WorkSource Oregon computer for job search activities. Translation work is in progress to make this new scheduling tool available in all 12 languages that are in use on the WorkSource website. And I'd also like to remind everyone that the Oregon Employment Department is hiring. This is a very rewarding place to work, and it's filled with dedicated and caring employees that are focused on helping people. Please visit unemployment.oregon.gov, and near the bottom of the quick links, click We're Hiring for current openings. Turning our view to the benefits that we're providing to people, this past Sunday, the temporary changes to the able and available to work requirements for people claiming unemployment insurance benefits expired. They expired because it was 90 days after the emergency declaration periods ended. This means people filing for initial or weekly claims for benefits must be able to work and available for suitable work for at least 40 hours per week, or if their work is shift-based, at least one shift per day. These standards are now much closer to the pre-pandemic requirements, but we did promulgate a new temporary rule so that if someone has barriers preventing them from returning to their work, they may still be eligible to receive benefits if they're willing to seek an alternate type of work for which they're available at least one shift per day and 40 hours per week. With this change to the availability requirements, the rule better reflects the current workforce and economy. That means some people who would have otherwise been denied benefits because of availability limitations will be able to receive them under this temporary rule change. This change also may help provide economic stability to local communities where there's a large number of people whose work schedules have been restricted, including people with underlying health conditions who may need to limit their exposure to COVID-19. We're notifying claimants to make sure people know about this rule change, and they can also visit our online temporary eligibility rule FAQs on our website for more information. We've scheduled 6 listening sessions for business, labor, community organizations, and others to give us feedback on these new temporary rules before we work on permanent availability rule changes. And we'll have simultaneous interpretation at these events in Spanish, Vietnamese, Russian, and Cantonese. Details on those listening sessions are posted on our webinar page. On Monday, Senator Wyden introduced federal legislation to increase the minimum standards for state unemployment insurance systems. Overall, this proposal ensures 26 weeks of benefits, expands eligibility, makes systems more accessible to non-English speakers, increases access to benefits for part-time workers, and prohibits states from reducing unemployment benefits too much when people earn some money while also getting benefits. We look forward to these common sense reforms that will help the UI program be an adequate safety net throughout the nation. Oregon's unemployment insurance system already provides a solid safety net, and most of these issues are already covered in Oregon law, although some adjustments would need to be made. Also, we're closely watching what's going on at the national level regarding the federal budget and debt ceiling. If there's a federal shutdown later this week, we're preparing to meet the needs of federal workers who may be eligible for benefits. And if the debt limit is reached, it may mean that states will not be able to access their UI trust funds held in United States Treasury accounts to pay benefits. We know this uncertainty can be unsettling, so we want to assure people receiving benefits, as well as federal workers, that we'll communicate updates regularly on our website, through social media, and by email. And I'm pleased to report in terms of our customer service performance that more than 95% of contact us inquiries are now being resolved within 7 days. And I hope very soon that we'll be able to provide up-to-date information on our current call data performance so that we can continue to share how we're doing there. We had some challenges with the reporting that we're fixing. And in terms of the total benefits that the Employment Department has provided throughout the course of the pandemic, from March 15th of last year through September 25th of this year, we've paid $11 million to more than 618,000 people. Last week, we paid about $28 million in benefits to 33,000 people. We're very excited and hopeful about the interest that employers and job seekers have in our job fairs. And we'll continue working hard to help people find jobs or training and helping employers find the workers that they need. Even though the demand for unemployment benefits is decreasing, our unemployment insurance employees are still helping people receive benefits they're eligible for and in many cases desperately need. I'm so thankful that we have such dedicated employees who continue going above and beyond and have been doing so for a year and a half now to help people in need. Also appreciate your ongoing reporting on how we're doing and the services we provide, and we're happy to try to answer any questions.
So this is Rebecca again. We're going to open the lines to members of the media to ask questions. We'll call on you in the order you RSVP'd. Please make sure to whom you state to whom you are directing your question. And as a reminder, if you are joining us by phone, be sure to hit *6 to unmute yourself. If you don't get your question answered, please email oed_communications@oregon.gov. So first up is Peter Wong with Pamplin Media.
Hi, good afternoon. David, I think you hit the points I want to ask about Senator Wyden's latest proposal, which he has introduced as a bill. I didn't see anything about economic triggers, but I assume he did that simply because that might require additional money that isn't in anybody's budget plan right now.
The
rest of it, I think a lot of the other points, I think Oregon already complies with them or is about to comply with them.
Peter, that's right on your first point. I'm not sure about the reasoning for it. I know that Senator Wyden has expressed strong support for having that permanent benefit extension program with automatic triggers so that it's much easier for states to have those benefits ready to pay quickly when the next economic crisis hits. But that isn't part of that particular bill. And you're right, Oregon does already meet most of the requirements in there. There's some kind of minor technical changes in parts of it, but the broad strokes of providing at least 26 weeks of benefits. There's discussion in there about being able to qualify based on earnings over a wider time period, and Oregon already has that. We already have that low earnings threshold in order to qualify for benefits. And actually the temporary rule change that I mentioned that we're making already moves Oregon much closer to that endpoint of broadening benefit access for part-time workers. So we already meet, or as you said, are on the way to meeting all of those, and certainly are excited to see these topics moving forward.
Okay, thanks. For Gail, given the pandemic and all these other variables that are almost impossible to predict, but we do have previous experience with federal shutdowns. I think the last one was the longest in federal shutdown history. I'm trying to remember, it was 35 days or something like that. But given the past track record on those, how much of a hit does the state take when those things happen for more than a few days or a few hours or a few days?
I think that it depends on what the provisions are related to a shutdown. In the past, we've seen provisions where once the federal government shutdown was over, retroactive pay was given to all of those federal workers. And so in that, it just spreads out the amount of money that's coming into those workers differently than it otherwise would, but isn't on net a different amount.
All right, but quick follow-up on that, were there any problems before in accessing the UI trust funds during previous shutdowns?
And I could address this. We haven't had any issues before. And during the government shutdown, we don't anticipate any risk there. The area where it's less clear and where there is some potential risk is if we reach the debt ceiling, and that just hasn't happened before. So we're continuing to look at options and try to get more clarity from the federal government on what the implications would be if that happens.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next up we have Bill Poehler with the Statesman Journal.
Yeah, hi. So my question is for Gail. It's about the job vacancies that you're talking about, the 90,000. Are most of those, and from the data that you have on them, are those for mostly lower end jobs as far as pay goes, or are we talking a mix of different income levels at those vacancies, or what's known about that?
That's a great question. So of the 98,000 job vacancies that we had in the spring and our summer, the July to September set will be out in a few weeks. But what we know right now is from April to June. And it's across the board. The hiring is widespread. It's across the board. The largest number of job vacancies was in healthcare and social assistance. And then after that, leisure and hospitality. We've seen record levels of hiring across several sectors, though. So we think about leisure and hospitality, having the largest share of minimum wage jobs of any sector. Healthcare has a range, of professional, technical staff, and then support staff as well. So there's a broad range there and need across it. But even beyond that, we look at, professional, technical, and scientific services. Has been hiring and wants to hire more, has already expanded past its pre-recession level, and those are generally quite high wage jobs. So it's not just one type of job that's out there. We have seen more occupations than typically employers would report that they're hiring for being hired for so far this year. So it's widespread across the economy.
That's interesting. Do we know, because there a lot of the workers, from my understanding, in the early part of the pandemic, the first ones who got let go were the lower end. Have we seen any kind of rebound as far as is there any data available on who's getting hired back, and if we're seeing some of those low income jobs getting filled again?
We've certainly seen that there's been an uptick in hiring. So far employers have added, nearly 80,000 jobs from January to August. So that's a record pace of hiring. We've seen, in leisure and hospitality, it does tend to have a lower average wage. And that sector has added more than 29,000 jobs so far this year. So in that 8 months of hiring, that's as much as they hired in 5 full years before the pandemic. So we've seen some gains happening there. Again, though, the gains have been happening in several areas of the economy, even areas that had been struggling to hire workers before, like durable goods manufacturing, which tends to be high paying, has seen more momentum so far this year. So again, it's really just been help wanted signs everywhere.
Awesome. Thanks, Gail. Appreciate it.
All right, next is Tom Cusack with Oregon Housing Blog. Tom, if you're on the call, or if you're on the phone, remember to hit *6. Okay, I'm not hearing Tom, so I'm going to go to Mike Rogaway with the Oregonian.
Hey there, I have a question for David. David, you said that your contact us calls, it's 97% resolved in 7 days now, and phones aren't in yet. Can you give me a sense, phone data isn't in yet, can you give me a sense in sort of analog terms, if not precise ones, if you're satisfied with responsiveness right now to the number of inquiries you're getting?
So I do want to correct one thing. I may have misspoken, but the response time for the contact us inquiries, we're at about 95% being responded to within a week. In terms of whether we're satisfied, no, in the fact that we're not stopping and we are committed to doing better and better. I don't want to take away from the amazing efforts that our teams have done making progress. And I don't want to dwell on how difficult it was for people to get through to us earlier in the pandemic, but we know how difficult it was, and that all of our communication channels were completely overwhelmed. For people that use the contact us inquiry now, we're resolving consistently now well over our goal of 90% within a week. And that means that we're able to get people's issues addressed, get them information that we're looking for before it could potentially impact another week of benefits. The call wait times, we will share that data as soon as it becomes available. we're not satisfied because we're not providing the level of service that we want, but we have made very significant improvements. And that includes recently having some of our employees get more in-depth training so that we anticipate that we have, we know that we have made significant progress recently, but we want to make sure that we have good, solid reports and data to share so that we're accurately reflecting our performance, whether it's up to our standards or not. But we're continuing constantly to look for ways to make ongoing improvements.
I think you stated it correctly initially, David. I must have misstated it as I read it back to you. In terms of staffing levels, you said you're still hiring. I'm curious where you are in that cycle. It seems like the volume of issues you're seeing now must be much lower than it was.
Sure, it's probably not as much lower as you might assume. The federal programs, the time period that they cover has ended, but there are still people that are filing retroactively. There's still issues that we need to resolve. There's still a lot of people seeking benefits, and the people that are seeking them tend to be in more complicated scenarios. There's also a lot of work that, as we've talked about repeatedly over the course of the pandemic, we've really been prioritizing the work needed to get people their benefits quickly and resolving those issues. There's a huge amount of work that still needs to be done that's important, but that wasn't directly impacting people the same way. So there's still a very high volume of work. In terms of where we are with the hiring, we've made a lot of progress. I think the challenges that we're seeing now are some of what, frankly, Gail was talking about, that most Oregon employers are seeing. It's a really tight labor market. We hired a lot of people who came here intending to work temporarily while they were unemployed because of the pandemic from their other jobs. Many of those employees, fortunately, have decided to stay with us, but some of them have gone back to their prior careers. We've also seen a lot of promoting up of employees that we hired to do some of the more straightforward initial work that have been able to get more skills, more training, and promote up, which is great for us and for them. And then that means that we have some additional vacancies. So we still have several hundred positions that we would like to fill. It's across a much broader range of types of positions now. So it's not just people answering the phones and helping people seeking benefits. It's not just people adjudicating claims. It's also the people that are providing that one-on-one guidance to people that are looking for jobs and training and to overcome barriers to them working. It's to people that are helping us combat fraud and follow up with criminal prosecutions when needed, and a lot of the technical and reporting and other enhancement work that we still want to do.
Thanks very much.
Next up is Kate Davidson with OPB.
Hi. A question about the debt ceiling. Can you just flesh out, sort of explain your concerns about what might happen with the debt ceiling, given that the UI Trust Fund is money that has already been paid into the system?
Sure, Kate, and I will preface this by saying I'm not an expert on federal kind of monetary processes, but we've talked a lot about Oregon's Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund, and each state has its own Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. Federal law requires that those state trust funds, though, be held in federal accounts by the US Treasury. When the federal debt ceiling is reached, there are a number of things that happen automatically that limit the federal government's ability to make payments from federal accounts. And the fear, and again, as I mentioned, we don't have absolute confirmation, but there is a risk that that would include states not being able to draw money down from those federally held trust fund accounts. And if that's the case, although the money is there, states are not able to draw it down to then make benefit payments to people. So that's the concern that we and other states have that we're following.
And before I ask my second question, is that, I mean, what's the degree of, I know this is all theoretical at this point, but the degree of risk there? I mean, how much certainty is there that there could be an issue there?
There is very little certainty about whether there would be an issue. And that's because we, in the past, when it looked like this might be an issue of reaching the debt ceiling, we did not get a lot of very clear guidance from the federal government on what the exact impacts would be. That's the case again right now. And I think part of that is because the nation has never hit that mark. So a lot of those are things that are actively worked on, I think, as that potential crisis approaches. So we don't have a lot of certainty, but certainly the impact of it would be very huge, which is why we're taking the risk seriously. And once we have a better idea of what that risk is, we'll certainly be happy to share that.
Okay, let me just ask a different question. I just want to check, and forgive me because I've been out for a few weeks, but in the current set of rules, if a parent has a kid home because of a school, class, or daycare closure, temporary closure because of COVID, are there any remaining scenarios in which that parent would qualify for unemployment benefits because of lack of childcare, or have all those temporary rules now expired?
So it's a great question. A lot of what we were talking about before was especially for PUA, where federal law said that you had to fall into one of certain predefined federal categories to be able to get benefits. And one of those was lack of childcare due to the COVID crisis. Because those programs are expired now, that's not really an issue. There were also the issues around what it means to be available to work. And people in that situation may still be able to get benefits. That's that temporary rule that we passed that made some changes to broaden access to benefits. So if I'm a parent and I work a job that is performed during multiple shifts of the day, maybe it's a job that has both day and swing shifts that are typically done. If I'm not able to work during the day shift because of childcare issues and school-related issues where my child is being homeschooled, as long as I'm able to work at least one of those shifts that the type of work I'm looking for is typically offered, I can still be eligible for benefits.
And if you were quarantined with a kid, a classroom was quarantined, so you weren't able to leave the house, would there no longer be benefits in that scenario?
Again, we get to a case-by-case situation. If somebody is quarantined and not allowed to leave their house, the availability requirement is generally that you're available if somebody offers you a job that week to actually perform the job. So if the type of work that I'm seeking is something that requires me to work outside of the house, I likely would not meet that availability requirement. That being said, there are a number of types of jobs that are typically done remotely, and we've certainly seen a huge growth of that during the pandemic. So for some situations, medical transcriptionist is a type of job that I think is very frequently done remotely. And if I'm still available to do that work in the environment that is typically offered, like working from home, then I might still be eligible for benefits in that situation.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, last up is Angelina Dixon with KVAL, but unfortunately her mic isn't working. So I'm going to read her question that she typed out for us. So her first question is, what out-of-the-box creative ways can employers use to attract more possible applicants?
Thanks.
Gail, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that it's less about how outrageous maybe the tactic is, as opposed to layering the things that we've seen employers do. And there's several of these. So the first one, and we've talked about this a little bit before, is raising wages is something that can make jobs look more attractive to workers. In addition to that, extra perks and benefits. So in 2018, we had a tight labor market too. And then about half of employers offered paid vacation or paid holidays. So if you were in the half of employers that didn't, then that's something that might be possible to add or expand on. In terms of other things, we've seen tuition assistance come up as one that's also a common add-on. And in addition to that, something that David mentioned that we've been doing is hiring in and then upskilling the existing workforce to promote up into opportunities. And that's a great way not only to attract but retain your workforce. In addition to those, recruitment intensity is something that employers often pick up during tight labor markets. And so by that, I mean putting out the help wanted sign and also posting online, listing with WorkSource Oregon, and maybe working with a recruiter from outside the area if you know, which we do know, that Oregon has primarily grown its labor force by people moving in from other states and areas. And in addition to all of those, another thing employers tend to do in a tight labor market is also look at loosening their previous experience requirements. So does a job really require, X degree and Y numbers of years of experience both to qualify? And to the extent that employers are able to, and it's safe to reduce those previous work experience requirements, it makes more applicants qualify to apply for your openings. So all of those things taken together are strategies that employers can layer on top of one another to get more workers into their job openings. And I've written about this. We've published information about it, and it's on oregonemployment.blogspot.com. There's an article written there about recruitment and retention in tight labor markets.
And I'll just add briefly, Gail mentioned that adjusting of pre-existing requirements for positions. I think although the labor market was tight even before the pandemic, we had a really long run where that hadn't been the case for a while. And a lot of employers have built up over time normal hiring requirements that have some built-in assumptions. And one of the things that we're doing to help people find jobs and to help employers is we really encourage employers to look at those assumptions and those requirements. They may well be screening out people who would be great employees based on what they're looking at. This is also a really good opportunity for employers and for all of us to look at communities that were hardest hit by the pandemic. And frequently there are those barriers that are artificially stopping people who would be great at jobs from getting them. And we can both share information at the employment department can with employers and with job candidates about how those people are good matches. There's also some tools that we can offer. For instance, the work opportunity tax credit that our agency administers helps give tax credits to employers that hire people from certain populations. And so this may be people that are veterans that have really good experience from their military career, but when you just look at the title of it in the military context, it isn't immediately obvious how that translates to the civilian jobs, or people that had been incarcerated that are still really good candidates. There's really a great opportunity now for all of us to expand who we're looking at to fill these positions. And that's one of the things that we're helping employers do.
Okay, and then Angelina had one follow-up question, which was, it was probably also for Gail, which is how long do we expect hiring troubles to go on for employers?
That's a great question as well. And it depends. So I do think that there are shorter term things that we're seeing changing up the labor market yet again in the ongoing pandemic. And then there are longer term headwinds that are facing employers in the economy as well. And they differ from one industry and one area of the state to another. So the two things really are, I was talking about how workers moving in from other states and other areas is the primary way that we grow our labor force. So if we are, really getting close to full employment in the labor force, as we get nearer to that in the labor force that we have, how can we grow more labor force? And so either in-migration is one of those things that could happen. And the other thing is retirements is another headwind to that. And so to the extent that those might be bigger challenges, and in some counties, they do have significantly more workers that are at or near retirement age than in others. Statewide, it's about 1 in 4 workers are kind of at or near retirement age or nearing it. And in some rural areas, it's like 1 out of 3. And so if that's a bigger challenge that's happening, you're going to be facing more retirements in your area. And you kind of have a low unemployment rate, then that means that creativity, that recruitment intensity and stuff, that's going to be something that needs to keep happening for longer. than in other areas or in other industries that people might work in. I know that's fairly general answer, but it really is different depending upon what type of employer you are and what part of the state you're in.